Hi everyone, it's Sam Whaley here, and tonight we're going to be speaking with Nick Thompson and Mike O'Donovan, aka Deja Vu. So, Mike won the RWA Class Championships last month, wasn't it? Or was it?
Yeah.
Something like that.
It was about a month ago.
So yeah, as he won the Class Championships, he got to speak to his elected sailor of his choice in the British sailing team, and he chose Nick. I'm sure everyone knows who Nick is. 2016 Rio Olympian and double world champion in laser class, and he's medalled at so many things. You can't write it down, it's too long. We've got them all on the call right now, and we're just going to have a bit of a chat, get Mike to ask his questions to Nick, and to talk about laser sailing and sailing in general, I guess. What sort of stuff did you have to ask Nick, really?
So when I first started getting into laser training and sailing laser quite a bit, Nick was kind of winning world championships and going to Rio and stuff. It was pretty a cool person to look up to and stuff for having someone to aim for, kind of. It's pretty cool to be able to chat with him and ask him questions as someone who's kind of pretty much still a mid-fleet racer in lasers. I guess to start off with, I can ask kind of, where did you start out? How did you know that you would go all the way to the Olympics, and when did you know that?
Well, thanks for having me. Thanks for having me on the call with you. Congratulations on your success.
Cheers.
And I've been having a go on that game myself, and it's not easy. So well done. It certainly isn't easy, but I think it's been good actually during this whole lockdown period when I first couldn't get out on the water. It was actually quite nice to keep my tactical brain sharp, keep you thinking. So I think it's a good platform. It's a good game. What's your name on the sailing, Mike?
Deja Vu.
I think I've sailed against you.
Have you?
I think so.
What's your name on it?
Slippery Salmon.
Oh, right, okay. I don't recognise it, but fair enough.
Mate, I was probably at the back. Probably long gone.
Well, I'm pretty brutal to everyone else on there, so.
Yeah, it's the only way to sail it. Get in a match race with someone. But to answer your question, I started out at a really young age, so sort of messing around in Optimists and boats like that down in Lymington where I grew up. And I wouldn't really say that I ever knew that the Olympics was a thing I wanted to do, or necessarily, I certainly didn't think that I would ever be able to do that. I think it was more of a natural progression. I was very fortunate that where I grew up, I had a lot of friends who were into sailing too, and really it started off as a bit of fun. It was very much a hobby and an opportunity to sort of get out and mess around in boats and play with friends, and I think it was only when I really I got picked up into sail in the front of a cadet. So it's a little like an Optimist, but a bit bigger and for two people. Yeah. And I was crewing in the front of one of those, flying a spinnaker the size of a handkerchief and all those sorts of things. But that's when it all kicked off at a sort of racing level, and from there I kind of got the bug a little bit. And then I know when I left that class and ended up sailing myself in the Optimist helming, it was certainly the competition was the part that actually I think I really started to enjoy the most, and I'd say that my love for the sport probably grew through the competition more than the love for sailing, and it's only now as I've got older that I would say it's almost gone the other way. I appreciate the sport so much more now that I understand it better and see it from a different side. So it was probably really to answer it quickly, I'd say I went through all the RWA programs, and it was when I medalled at I won the Optimist Europeans. That was the moment when I was like, oh, maybe I am okay at this. Maybe I could do this. Could do this, But it was never. I never thought this is going to be my job and I'm going to be doing this forever. It was more of let's work hard and see where we end up.
Yeah. Did you ever think you would sail any other boats, like to high level?
Yeah, absolutely. I sailed cadets, Optimists, sailed 29ers for a year. But the thing I really loved was the feeling you get when you're racing single-handed, and when everything is down to you ultimately. And if you make a mistake, it's on you. If you do well, it's on you. And that's the side that really appealed to me. And I think it's only now, again, as I've got older and and had more opportunities to sail other boats that I really am now appreciating working in teams and that different side that brings.
Cool. You've done 4 Olympic cycles now. Yeah. When you're going for your first couple, when you're trying to race against like Paul Goodison and in the first one maybe Ben Ainsley, was he still around in lasers?
Yeah, he was just leaving
Right. Yeah. Did you look up to them a lot and learn off of them as much as you could and stuff like that? Just like probably someone like Sam and Elliot and stuff are doing now. And
yeah,
you think the British team are really good at that compared to other countries?
Yes, I think you've hit the nail on the head there.
Right.
You know, I was very fortunate when I came into the laser system. There were so many good, talented sailors already in place. You know, you had like Ben had obviously just left, but you know, you had people like Ed Wright, Paul Goodison, you had Dan Holman, you had Mark Howard. You know, there were just so many good sailors, and I think that they'd all got to that level through training together and pushing each other continually. And I was very fortunate I was able to start training with those guys quite early on. And it just showed me where the level was. You know, I'd come out of kind of youth and junior sailing and thinking, you know, I'm okay at this. I don't quite know how good I am, but, you know, I think I'm okay. And then when I stepped into Olympic sailing, I suddenly realized how much there is to learn, you know, and how big that transition is between, you know, that kind of being at the top of your youth level to being a full-time Olympic athlete. And and I was a bit of a sponge. You know, I just tried to absorb as much as I could from those guys around me, and they were all very different personalities. So for me, that was really important, you know, because I could see that there were different ways of going about it, and it wasn't necessarily that to go to the Olympics or to win a World Championships or whatever it is that your goal is. There isn't one set way of doing it. You know, there's so many different approaches, and I think the thing that I learned the most though from those guys is just what hard work looks like, you know, and not just on the water but off the water, and the way you live, the way you train, you know, just everything has to be world class in order to get to the front of the fleet.
Yeah. Doing all of that work, do you ever, you know, what do you do to like relax a little bit at other times, or do you find the whole sailing aspect relaxing in itself?
Yeah, no, I absolutely don't. No, I do now, but I didn't find the whole sailing thing that relaxing. It was for me personally. I've always struggled through my Olympic campaigns with switching off. You know, I would obsess with details of how I could do things better, and I would never in any area go, oh, okay, I'm good enough at that now. You know, it was always no. Is this what I'm doing at this moment? Is that going to make me a better sailor? And if it isn't, then I won't do it. You know, and I think you're absolutely right. You do need to have things outside of the sport to take your mind off it and take you away from it and detach, so that you can come back fresh. And for me, I ended up, you know, I have a lot of other hobbies like cycling, which played very well because it tied in. Yeah. At that moment, a bike rides past. What are the chances? But you know, cycling is very good for fitness, but it also clears your mind and takes you away from the sport. And the same with other water sports. So, yeah, I think it's very, very important to, you know, in any profession, whether you're a CEO of a bank or you're a world-class athlete. I think you have to have moments where you can take yourself out and you know, and have some perspective on what you're doing.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, because I was reading a couple of interviews, and you said you were quite relieved when you won your first World Championships. You know, you had medaled a few times before then, and you're really wanting that win, and it took a couple of years to get it. And you said in one of the interviews that you were quite nervous the night before the final day. You thought you might be able to win it and struggled to get enough sleep that night. You know, what kind of things do you do to help with nerves before an event or during an event before the last day, that kind of thing?
Yeah, these are really good questions, by the way. You've done your homework. Yeah, no, it's a really interesting question. I think the first thing I realised when I got a little bit further in my career is if you want something more, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to come to you. You know, and I think that kind of I never had an expectation of doing well at a regatta. You know, I'd had 2 bronzes and 2 silvers at World Championships, and I'd never won one. I'd come close, but I still never expected it. I wasn't like, the natural progression is now I'm going to win a Worlds. And I think that because I didn't do that, it always meant that I would just focus on the processes really hard. You know, so I would always be trying to get better. I'd always be focusing on little things building up to regattas, and not so much thinking about the whole picture of how I want to do in this regatta. But when you start getting into the regatta and you get to the latter stages, you know, I think anyone's telling you a lie if they're telling you they're not getting nervous. You know, and I think for me that knowing that was quite key, and actually really believing it and understanding it. So, you know, I look around and I go, yeah, I'm feeling nervous, but so's everybody else on the racetrack. You know, so it puts us back on the same level. There's no reason why I should be more nervous than anyone else. And then, going into that kind of that last day of my first Worlds, you're absolutely right. I struggled to sleep because my mind switched from focusing on the processes to focusing on the outcome. You know, and I was suddenly thinking, blimey, I could win a World Championships here. So what I tried very hard to do is be very strict on my routines and just stick to the things that I know that I need to do every day. And almost that was enough distraction for those moments to take my mind away from it again. And then it was just a case of get on the water, go through your pre-start routines, all those things. And if you keep yourself busy, I think you kind of almost eliminate the possibility of your mind going too crazy with nerves and stress.
Yeah, fair. Yeah, I don't know how much you've played of the first regatta game or anything, but certainly that was one of the main attraction points for me. It's like you get that same kind of thrill when you're on the water. You know, when it's really tight racing, especially because it's like 5-minute races. But like the nerves can really get to you. There's been over this summer, this lockdown period, it's been quite interesting because there's been lots of virtual events compared to actual events.
Absolutely.
And it's like each one I'm going in and I'm like, oh, I need to do well in this event. And then by the end, it was like you're saying, by the end, I was just I'm just going to do as best as I can. I'm going to sail my race and see what happens. But yeah, it's definitely exactly like you say.
I think the virtual regatta is actually really good for that sort of event preparation stuff because you're totally right there. You do get that same feeling. Kind of you're trying to win, you're trying to perform just like you are out on the water. So by doing these small VR inshore races, then it does bring out the same feeling, which is great to train and practice your routines in that situation, I find.
Do you have any like routines or rituals you have before you go in the water, or the night before, or anything?
I wouldn't say I've got any like superstitions that I kind of really stick to. I think my biggest routines are just preparation. I really like to be very particular and make sure that I've done everything properly. And you know, and some of those are quite funny. You know, things like the night before, I'll make sure I've counted the exact number of bars I'm going to need based on the conditions expected for that day. I've got the exact number of bottles. I know all of that stuff is prepared and ready. And then when I wake up in the morning, I'll do it all again anyway. And then, you know, when I get down to the boat park, I'll do certain things on the boat. And I think I wouldn't say they're superstitions. They're just things that I've realized almost allow me to get into a mindset of knowing that I've done what I can do. I'm ready, you know, and I find, you know, as an example of that, when you go to the Olympics, you're suddenly surrounded by a huge support team, and they try and take a lot of those things away from you. You know, so they'll prepare your food, they'll give you your drinks, they'll do all these. And I had to get to a point with them where I was like, no, I'm sorry guys, I really appreciate the help, but actually these are critical for me to make me feel like I'm doing what it takes to be in the position to be ready for this racing. And if you just do these things for me, it almost you know, throws me off my game a little bit.
Yeah, fair enough. So I was going to ask a little bit about the whole Olympics 2020 2021 thing. You just missed out on the Olympic selection to Ali Hansen this year, or rather next year now. Do you feel in any way that you're kind of now become the sort of teacher or the coach like Paul Goodison and that were to you when you first came in, and you're now kind of helping the younger guys come through? or do you think,
Yeah.
oh, yeah, I'll go for Olympics again next year, and I'll get a next 4 years or whatever. I'll get again.
Yeah, no, I think I'm done with
Right, yeah.
Olympic sailing for now. No, yeah, very much so. I mean, I think the only way really to get an answer to that is to ask those guys. But I've tried quite hard through the last few years to actually help those guys as much as I can. And now that I'm effectively stopped sailing, I'm now trying to help out Elliot and the other guys, on the water coaching and trying to basically pass on anything that I think I can help them with. So I'm trying to be quite an open book with those guys. And equally, if there's anything I can offer, in terms of guidance with, what it's like at the games or anything like that, I'm trying to be, very, very open with those guys. And, I really think that I'm leaving at a good time. I see that, I see the state of the guys in the laser class now, and they're bloody fantastic sailors. I really do actually think Elliot's in with a very good shout of winning the Olympics, and that's, for me, that's brilliant. To leave the class in that position and feel like there's those guys that are going to continue on what previous people have been doing with Ben Ainsley, with Goody, and a little bit with myself. So it's I feel it's in a really good position.
Awesome. You said before that you might want to go into America's Cup or TP52s. Is that still the plan, or is it more coaching in the Olympic side for now?
Yeah, it's good question. I mean, I've done a fair bit of bigger boat sailing now, and I do really enjoy it. It's great fun working in a team and being in that kind of bigger environment, and almost having more specific roles to focus on. So often I'm a tactician on yachts, and just having that one job and taking away a lot of other things can be really interesting. But yeah, I'm really loving the team dynamic side of that. But equally, I do still love the Olympic draw, and coaching is something I find very rewarding. I think I've got to a point with myself where I find it so much more satisfying trying to help somebody else achieve their goals than the actual satisfaction I ever got from winning a world championships or whatever it might be. I've always found that it's almost those victories are almost a bit hollow. It's the process of getting there and the journey and the people you do it with that's the big part. When you actually stand on that top step, it's almost a relief. It's not a feeling of elation. And so by trying to help others, I think it's actually gives me much more satisfaction and reward.
Right. Or that you work really hard to be the consistent sailor rather than having a win here and a 20th here and up and down the fleet the whole time. What do you do often to try and minimize like those big mistakes and just make sure that you're always somewhat near the top? Yeah.
Again, you've done your homework. I tried very hard through my sailing to basically minimize the big errors. And I think the biggest area for improvement with that was when I really started sailing more on percentages and managing fleet positioning much more. So I think my eyes became a lot more open to what's going on around the racetrack instead of so locked in on what I'm doing at the boat. And what that allowed me to do was just reduce the leverage on risk. So I would always go, okay, I'm sailing up this upwind course, and I'm pretty sure that side's going to pay off. But actually, I'm going to close that leverage against the fleet, and so I might not round the women mark in first. I might round it in 10th, but what I'm not going to do is round it in 40th. And so it was, in a way, it's a frustrating thing to do because you eliminate some of those golden moments, when you're sailing, where you just see something and you just go because you know it's the right thing to do, and so you end up rounding the women mark miles ahead of everyone. But ultimately, through a regatta, I think sailing with that mentality, doesn't often pay off. Occasionally you might have a regatta you win, but through a career, I don't think you're going to be very consistent. So yeah, it's something I tried very hard to work on, and it was always about imagining the risk and reward of every decision that I make.
Yeah, cool. Do you have a favorite boat to sail other than the laser? I know you said you sail cadets and offies, but do you sail something like a wasp like Sam or anything else for fun?
It's I've sailed them off a few times. Pretty exciting stuff.
Yeah, a bit quicker.
Yes, absolutely. And equally, the foiling thing is amazing, and I do love it. But the feeling that you get when you're flying downwind on a 40-foot yacht, something about it that's just I don't know. It's very satisfying. I think that's probably some of my biggest highs have been sailing on fast 40s and TPs and things like that, where you've got this huge heavy boat that just shouldn't be doing this.
It's like all the pieces of the puzzle come together and just works.
Exactly. Yeah, that's so satisfying. So yeah, I wouldn't say I have one particular favorite. I just, I think now that I've got a bit more time on my hands, I'm trying to branch out and do a few more things. I'm appreciating so much more how fantastic this sport is.
Yeah, cool.
I don't think I've ever really. Obviously, I've only been around for a few years. With sailing around Nick and being sort of around the British Sailing Team laser program, so I haven't really known you to be injured very much. So what has been your worst injury, and how, what happened? How did you overcome that one?
I've had a few injuries. If you ask my dad, he'd tell you I was injured all the time. But no, I've had a few broken wrists and knee issues and things like that. But I'm very fortunate that when I came onto the program, there was already such a good system in place with physios, with strength and conditioning coaches, with physiologists, and team doctors that, I've always worked so hard on the physical side of the sport. I've always said, that it's an area that you can control. So why not be the best you possibly can be at it? And I think because I bought in very hard into, the different programs that were set to me, that reduced those injuries that you normally often see associated with hiking. So lower backs, knees, ankles, those kind of injuries that often plague people through certainly in lasers. So I'd say that, probably through just through really good, well-structured training programs, I've managed to reduce those injuries. But my biggest ever sailing injury was probably an Optimist when I sailed over a hailing bar, and got that a little bit wrong. Got flung out the boat, flipped over, landed on me. I ended up in hospital and blah blah blah. But we've all been there.
Yeah, sounds fun. Do you have any funny stories from the Olympics or the whole journey, or what's the funniest story that you think you've experienced in your years of laser sailing?
I think the best things I've experienced in the laser sailing through the years is just the friendships you make. As you know, Sam, like the characters on the scene are all very varied and very different, and somehow we all seem to get along amazingly well. So it's something I know I'll miss very much, and it's been a great journey. But the one moment that really sticks out to me from the Olympics was going into the closing ceremony of the games, and it was in the Maracanã Stadium. So it was where the Football World Cup was held, and we all walked in. You all walk in as athletes, and they have the big show, and you're sat in the stadium and blah blah blah. But then when the cameras dim down and the lights go out, all the little characters came back out with their costumes, and all the athletes all went into the middle where the pitch is, and or the stadium center, and all the characters they took off their costumes and gave it to all the athletes. So we were all, you can imagine thousands of athletes from different sports all running around in like Teletubby costumes, smashing into each other, and it was just such a strange, surreal feeling. I'd just gone through a very tough Olympics. I didn't achieve what I wanted to do, but I was still enjoying the whole moment of being at the games, and very thankful to have had that opportunity. And that was a really nice way to cap it off.
Oh, that sounds quite an interesting experience.
Yeah, it was very strange.
And what was the opening ceremony like? Because that's I think for my actually earliest memory of Olympics, I don't really remember Beijing 2008, but what does stand out in my mind is the London 2012 opening ceremony was incredible, obviously. So what was the real one like, actually being there in the stadium and everything?
Yeah, I wouldn't be able to tell you.
You weren't there.
I couldn't go. I couldn't go to it. It's my racing started about 2 days later, and the whole setup in Rio was very tricky because we had to go. We were, as sailors, we were staying in a central hotel that was near the sailing venue. But the Olympic Village was over the other side of the city, so over towards the Copacabana Beachway. So it's quite a long way, and you have to go through the city. And the Maracanã Stadium, where the opening ceremony was near the sailing. But in order for the athletes to go to the stadium, we had to go to the village, then back to the Maracanã Stadium, back to the village, and back to a hotel, which would have meant about 5 hours of driving, plus the 4 hours that you have to be there for the opening ceremony. And we just deemed it was an unnecessarily silly thing to do when racing was starting so soon. So actually what we ended up doing was watching it on TV, a load of the sailors in the hotel on the top floor, all on beanbags, watching it probably the same way you guys watched it. So that was a very strange thing, but it still made you feel like you were at the Olympics. But really the moment that the actual Olympics really felt like it kicked off to me was sailing out to the first race. And suddenly these helicopters, 2 helicopters flew overhead, and I was like, oh, I wonder where they're off to, and then it hit me. Oh, no, they're here to film what we're doing, and I was like, oh, okay, maybe this is quite a big thing. And that's when it kind of sunk in a little bit more.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Cool. You said in the past that Robert Scheidt is really quick upwind and he's a bit heavier and a bit taller, and someone like Ben Ainsley was really quick downwind, and you tried to be the kind of middle of all of them, jack of all trades, so almost. So like, what were the biggest things that you had to overcome to work on those aspects that you struggled with, like making up for the weight difference and getting the speed downwind and stuff?
Yeah, the weight was something I struggled with forever, and basically I just had to be incredibly diligent with my training and diet, and it was annoying that I went through my entire Olympic sailing career being too small, basically, which was a bit frustrating. And now that I've stopped, I've lost like 6 kilos, and
really?
So I don't think I'd suit a laser standard very well anymore. Maybe a radial.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I'd say that every sailor now at the top, they don't really have any weaknesses. I think in the past you could pick things that people did so well that it allowed them to get an edge. Like Paul Goodison was so good downwind that it allowed him to round them with Mark Deep and pull back through the fleet. Not that he would do that very often. He'd often round at the front, but and you could look at Robert Scheidt and say that he was just dynamite upwind and still good downwind. But now I think everyone's so well rounded in the fleet that you can't really have any weaknesses or vulnerabilities. But certainly I think I would say I was always better upwind than I was downwind. And the way that I tried to improve my downwinds was just by doing more of it with more good sailors. And I think you very quickly learn what you're doing wrong when you're racing against people that are just giving you a hammering every time. And I was very fortunate. I was sailing against what I still consider probably one of the best sailors ever downwind was Paul Goodison. So I was having to. That was the level I had to sail against, and it pushed me a lot.
Cool. I have a few questions more about like the financial side of sailing, because obviously that can get in the way sometimes. So I was just wondering, while you're at university, what was like the main thing that helped you balance the two? The finance in the university and the sailing on the other side.
Yeah. It's tricky that, I think, and it's not just finance, it's time, it's almost more time than it is finance. I think I was very fortunate. I went to Exeter University and they gave me a scholarship. So I basically sailed for the university, and they were very, very supportive of my time and my situation. And I mean, it was never easy. I haven't come from a very affluent family or anything like that. So I was always trying very hard to find sponsorship, and certainly through my career, again, I was very fortunate that I had sponsors that would provide me with equipment and subsidize a lot of things. And equally, again, I was very fortunate that I came into the program when lottery funding had started. So, I managed to get some good results just before I started university. And then as I was at university, I got a few decent results that allowed me to go on to some levels of funding. So that, that suddenly subsidized my sailing quite heavily. But it was very tricky. I think the thing that you need to be very, very honest and realistic about is you shouldn't. I don't think should really ever truly hedge. I don't think trying to do both things perfectly is never going to work that well. I think it's almost the case of keep the laser sailing ticking over, but just really get that university done. I think it's so critical to do that. And so that's almost what I ended up doing. I did 2 years quite hard with the university, kept training and did what I could in my free time, but made sure I passed all my courses. And then I actually ended up taking like sort of pretty much a year out to in the run up to the Olympics with Paul to be his training partner, and just because I knew how much I was going to learn from that opportunity.
Yeah.
And then I ended up having to go back to university and finish off, which wasn't easy. All your friends have moved on. Most of them ended up doing masters, thankfully. But yeah, your friends have moved on. The circumstances have changed. It's hard to get back into that routine of university, but it can be done. But yeah, I think it's a hard balance. But I think if you think how much time there is in a day, you can really achieve quite a lot. And there's certainly time to be doing, if not sailing all the time, doing all the other things that will help you in your sailing. So the fitness, all of those things, and making sure your nutrition's good, as good as it can be while at university.
Yeah. And did you have any, go-to things when trying to find sponsors? What did you find worked and what did you find didn't work? I guess.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I found with sponsorship wasn't so much like thinking, what can I take from these people? Actually, why would they want to sponsor me? What can I offer them? And I think having that slightly different mentality. So I never particularly found I never really looked that much for a huge financial sponsor. I was always more thinking, actually, if I can work with companies that will support me through my campaign, that's going to be almost more useful and beneficial to both parties.
Yeah. Cool.
Any more questions, Mike? Or?
Not sure. I've got some stupid ones on here, but I don't really want to ask them.
Go on, ask them. I don't mind.
I've been asked to ask how sandy is sandy. How sandy is sandy?
It's pretty sandy.
Yeah.
Pretty sandy, yeah.
I guess from that, do you ever go out in wind, or did you ever go out in wind conditions that were, way too high? You'd probably capsize the whole time, but you'd get so much more from it because then when it was less windy, you'd figure it out. Or did you just, try to maintain your sailing kit a bit better to not break it and not break yourself?
I'd always protect my sailing kit and try not to break it. But we'd often go out in conditions that were probably a bit silly. But we'd always have support crew, and we'd always have boats there to help. But many a time have I gone out in conditions that I'm thinking, hang on, this is a bit silly. And actually, it wasn't that long ago before the World Championship, the last World Championships we did, that we were all in Villamora out training. Right. And we went out the entrance into some waves that were well over mast height, and really? got that a little bit wrong, and I ended up I couldn't get back into the entrance because I ended up capsized. My kicker came off, so my boom was up in the air, which meant it fell off the gooseneck. So then I had to surf my boat back into the beach, which wasn't in the marina, and then carry my boat up the beach. Managed to not damage or break anything. Which was a miracle. Yeah. And then I turned around to see the French sailor's rib had been completely flipped backwards. It was just carnage. And then other boats were getting damaged, and that was a pretty hairy moment. But hopefully we can all look back on it and laugh later on.
Yeah, that's the best thing about the windy conditions. You go out and then it's awful at the time, and you look back at it and it's like, oh, that's pretty funny.
Yeah, it is. It's secondary fun, isn't it? It's very much secondary. Yeah. But the laser's so good for that. You can really go out in most conditions.
Yeah.
Whereas you think of other boats.
Yeah, compared to double handers as well, you don't have the shrouds to worry about when you nosedive or anything. They're relatively safe.
Yeah, exactly.
I was just going to say, what's the windiest you've ever sailed laser in? And do you know what your top speed is ever? Do you ever put GPS on?
I should know this because we did. We recorded top speed. Well, what I think was probably my top speed. It was a long time ago in Hailing. Not the time in my Optimist that I crashed, but I can't remember what the speed was, but it was something very high for a laser. I was like, are you sure that's correct? Or maybe it was a GPS glitch, but I'm not sure what it was. In terms of wind speeds, I'd say that I don't know exactly what the highest was, but those conditions where you're out and your boat just capsizes. It doesn't matter what you do. You're hiking to windward with the sail out and the boat just gets flattened. And then the whole water just turns to white. Like, there is no separation between there and the water anymore. And you just have to just hang on to the side of your centerboard and wait it out. It's just a huge gust. So I don't know what it is, probably like 60 knots or something silly. And we certainly weren't going around the racetrack.
Yeah.
Nice.
What's been your most expensive crash, I guess, as well? Or have you had any big crashes or a breakage?
Yeah, good question. Probably sailing a moth.
Right.
Probably not in the laser.
Thankfully
in the laser, nothing ever is that bad. You can break a top section or whatever. Although even though that's better now with the new carbon tops. But probably in the moth. I first day out and I managed to break quite a few things.
All right.
mainly with my body.
Right. Yeah.
Cool.
Cool.
You got any other questions, or
No.
think we should start wrapping up?
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Well, thanks very much, Nick, for joining us this evening. It's been pretty cool. I mean, you were coaching me earlier today, coaching everyone, which is pretty good fun. And thanks for being part of it. Congratulations to Mike again for beating me at the Spring Class Championships. I'm still bitter about that.
That's the best bit about your victory, mate.
Yeah. Well, I spent a bit more time at my desk, so I spent most of my summer at my desk. But so maybe
a win's a win, bud. A win's a win.
True.
And it's been really interesting hearing all Nick's stories. So thanks everyone for joining, and this is well done, Mike, again.
Cheers.
Yeah, well done, Mike. Thanks for they were good questions. You've done some homework.
Cheers. Had a Google last night.
Yeah, nice. Good work. Yeah, nice. Cool. All right, guys. Thanks very much.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Cool.
Thanks for the interview. It's been good fun.
Yeah, no worries.
Yeah.
Chat to you later.
See you all soon.
See ya.
Bye.